Hi friends, I am Marie Woods, founder of 𝑰𝒎�𝒂𝒈 Foundation, your host, a professional counselor, family and marriage therapist, and wholeness life coach. Welcome to Relationship Real Talk, the podcast where we dive deep and tackle the toughest relationship challenges Christians face today. Are you tired of struggling with unforgiveness, past wounds, and conflicts? Feeling lonely or having trouble communicating? Wrestling with trust issues or trying to balance your faith with your relationship goals? Feeling stuck and stagnant in your relationship? You are in the right place. Here at the Relationship Real Talk, we get real and cover a wide range of topics, including relationship anxiety, trauma bonds, infidelity, estrangement, toxic dynamics, dating after divorce, and how to heal from relationship trauma and grow and build healthy and lasting relationships. We're not just about identifying the problems. We're all about finding real, integrated solutions from multiple disciplines and offering professional help from different fields to mend and strengthen your relationships. So, let's get started on this journey together, one honest, heartfelt conversation at a time. Hello, welcome to today's podcast, Relationship Real Talk. I'm your host, Marie Woods. So again, today we have our special guest speaker. His name is Doug Scott. Now, some of you probably already know him. He's spoken to us in the past couple of weeks for two wonderful topics. And for some of you, if you are new to our podcast, I would highly recommend to go back to listen to his first two episodes. Based on that two episodes, we are adding to the third part today. Let me briefly remind you who Doug Scott he is. He's a licensed clinical social worker. He works as a mental health counselor in pastoral counseling in Dallas for the last 23 years.
I lived 2 years with the Capuchin Franciscans in Nicaragua, and then spent 4 years in Massachusetts, 3 of which I was at Boston College, getting a graduate school, in clinical social worker and pastoral theology. And then I spent 4 years, my wife did her medical residency in Chicago, so 4 years in Chicago, and worked with Catholic Charities there. Loved it. Learned a lot about therapy, especially therapy with the marginalized, the economically disenfranchised, the ones that fall through the cracks, you know. And then we moved to Texas, where I'm from originally, and I worked various places, including 2 universities in their counseling department. But since 2019, I've had my own private practice. So I've been a therapist for 23 years, but the private practice has been since 2019.
I haven't heard that part of your wife's work and your work before become a private practitioner. So I feel like we have more can bring into this our community to our audience in the future. So I'm all excited about that. Doug, his big theme is about made in the image of God, growing in the likeness of God. I personally love that topic. I know it's a big one, so that's why He's doing 3 parts with us. And I want to remind you, the first part he did was about being is becoming, why the Trinity is the template of all reality. Wonderful topic. I highly recommend you go back to listen or re-listen to it. And the part 2 is the Trinity and the human experience. So Doug, before you just take us to the part 3, could you just sum up, help us to see the whole frame, the picture of the 2 parts?
Oh, wonderful. Yes, thank you for that invitation. The idea of the Trinity is so central to the Christian notion of reality. It's supposed to be the central doctrine, but it's been so described in theological abstraction that it's difficult to understand or even think about what is the Trinity. So that's been the work of a lot of people, a lot of theologians, even brilliant counselors. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, for example, Richard Rohr, a friend and mentor, as well as Cynthia Bourgeault. Her book on the Trinity and the Law of Three is amazing. I recommend that book. What I guess I'm a part of this wave of trying to look at the Trinity, unpack its power, and see how everything is indeed triune in nature. For even evolution to unfold, there has to be three forces. And so the part one of our talks series here was really introducing the law of three. And law of three, the way I like to kind of think about it is that there's a primal force. It's moving in one direction, and then it sort of meets a contrasting force. And this contrasting force creates the dynamic tension there, creates a potentiation, something that grows over time. And it can feel like a conflict in the human realm. It can feel like a conflict, but all change, all novelty comes from trying to reconcile two seemingly opposing forces. The primal force, the contrasting force, and then there's this reconciling force. And the reconciling force is what we talked about in part two, particularly. But going back to part one here, what we had specifically talked about was that the very nature of God, the divine template for us all, is much more complicated and beautiful than we often even think about in Christian circles. And that there's this idea that embedded in all of reality, coming from God's own divine life, is a constant desire to create, to become aware, to focus energies, focus chaos into some level of focusing or vortex, becoming aware of the contrast, becoming conscious of wanting to do something about the contrast, and then create. That is the creative principle that ushers out this flow. So those things are embedded, that drive to experience ourselves through creation, to understand some reality which seems like chaos, to understand it and make sense of it and participate in it. All of those things are coming from the very divine nature of God. Yeah, that's part one. Part two then was to really focus in on what it's like to live as humans behind this veil of forgetting. It feels like the ethos of separation. It feels like we're separate out there. You know, you and I are separate. We're separate from God. We're separate from the earth. And what I'm saying here is that this veil is actually, rather than being the fall of grace, it's actually you could think of it as the fall that the acorn might fall from the tree, which is a necessary detachment, which is a necessary event that happens so that the acorn can individuate from its parent tree, fall to the ground, die to itself, and then rise as a new tree. Yeah, so this is the fall is not a falling of grace, but rather a falling into the very divine life of continuing to unfold in the divine evolution. And we are God's sense organs in God's own divine unfolding. So that is a great part of what we talked about in part two. And I'm going to bring in part three, we're going to focus in on some of the things that we touched on part two, particularly the seeds of hope and the flower of joy. I'm also going to introduce this idea of the seeds of anxiety and what I'm calling the weeds of terror. So we're going to introduce that as part of the SHIPS approach, SHIPS, the SHIPS approach. Yeah. So I guess if I were to give this a working title, this third part, I would say that it is healers participating in the life of the Trinity, something like that.
So healers, it comes to my mind as a healers. There's a psychological healers, there's spiritual healers, different healers. So I'm assuming this topic targeted our audience who are out there doing the healing work. Well, not to exclude those people who are looking for healing as well, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah. All healers, if they're honest, we are wounded healers. If we're resurrected people or Easter people or people who feel rejuvenated and enlivened after our own crucifixions and our own resurrections, we have to remember that the great archetype of the Christian faith includes Jesus emerging from the tomb in a resurrected body, a perfected body, you might say, but with scars. The very wounds of his crucifixion remain as part of this resurrected body. And so I think that we can see the very nature of healing are people who have become conscious to some degree through their own trials and transformations. And usually, maybe I would say always, I guess I don't want to make it a definitive statement, but if I were to make a definitive statement, I would say always that healers are those who desire to share their transformational journey in some way with others. So I'd really like to say that healers might be people who are intentional about their participation in the life of the Trinity. We all are participating in the life of the Trinity, whether you like it or not, because we are all in the flow of this divine unfolding. What is required of us for a life of joy, now I didn't say happiness, but life of joy, meaning, and purpose, and all of that. What is required is our yes, our desire to, our intention to orient our life inside of the Trinity, to participate in the Trinity, and to allow this flow to use our own embodiment, our own incarnational reality to sow seeds of hope for future joy of the world. It's nothing less than that. We are, as Saint Teresa of Avila says, Christ has no body on earth but yours. Yours are the hands through which he moves. Yours are the eyes through which he looks compassion upon the world. Yours the feet that walks upon the land. So that's a beautiful invitation that we are responding to. Every living organism is responding to this participation. We can't help but respond to it. But the human being is one that could say no. It's going to happen anyways, but it will be a life of transmitting less than whole energy, if you will.
Yeah.
And we as healers are those who say, I don't got this right. I don't have this right, this human life right. I don't even know what right is, but I'm going to offer in my relationships, through my relationships, some way to help others find their wholeness if they're in times of brokenness.
That's beautifully described, Doug. And yeah, take us to this SHIPS, SHIPS, and the motto.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm going to share why and how I came up with the SHIPS approach. Is maybe about 2 years ago, I felt the holy nudge, as it were, from God to think about a praxis model, a model that can help orient those who are in good friendships, good relationships, healers, more formal healers like counselors and spiritual directors. How can we accompany another that results in the highest and greatest good, or at least offers the opportunity for the highest and greatest good for all? And that was one question. The other question that arose from that is instinct to create, my response to the internal drive of the creator to create. That the second part of that was when someone enters into a therapeutic relationship, let's say with a counselor, and then later on they emerge from counseling as someone who is more transformed. They're enjoying life at a deeper, more expansive level. And they are also, these waves of energy are enlightening others with whom they are in relationship. When that happens, are there steps that have had to happen in order for them to move from one level to a more transformed level? That was an open-ended question that I had. And likewise, if someone were to enter into, say, a religious tradition or a spiritual tradition or some kind of meditation practice, and they emerged from that or are still inside of it, and they're finding themselves truly transformed. Yeah. What would have been steps there? And finally, because I'm informed by my own Christian background, I wanted to know, are there steps that maybe we could even say the Jesus Christ event exhibited? My response to all of that was something like this, and I don't think it's the best version or maybe even the best protocol, but I hope it's simple enough. It's not easy. It can, each one of the letters that we'll be talking about deserves its maybe even a book, and I'm sure this book's been written about it. But I wanted to package something that we can remember. And this is actually some things that I teach my own clients. So even if a client is coming to me with, say, anxiety or depression or something like that, I not only use the 𝒕 approach with them, but also I'm teaching them how to use it in their life with others, because the very nature of relieving some of the anxiety and the depression follows this pattern as well. So yeah, I maybe it's too much to hope for, but I'm going to offer it here and see how. I would love to know how you resonate. So the �s approach, I actually begin with the I in the middle. And I'm inviting people now to envision a ship that's on the water. And the I, when I write the word �s approach, when I write the word �s, I write the I as an exclamation point, because I want to bring attention to that middle letter there, because that is the key to the entire approach. It's like the mast on a ship. So if you're envisioning a ship, we have a big pole right in the middle of the ship, the mast. It goes way up, and it's from this pole that you have little, maybe you could envision ropes attached to each one of the letters, the S, the H in front of the I, and then the P and the S behind the I. And maybe on these ropes, you might have the sails, to take the ship forward. So it's absolutely key and central to all of the other steps. And the I stands for interview. Interview. And I understand this in 3 different ways. Interview. I'm informed strongly by, and some of your listeners might be aware or familiar with motivational interviewing. It's a technique often used in counseling where we enter the view of the other person with whom we are given to help, so let's say a care seeker is looking for care, and the caregiver could be a friend, could be a spouse, could be a parent or counselor or spiritual director, the caregiver. So the caregiver needs to have a desire to enter the view of the other. To do the ship's approach, it's just good counseling skills. It's where I lay aside my own biases, or at least become very aware of my biases, so that I don't immediately judge the other person, but I want to enter their view. Also, the word enter as a prefix means to share. So interfaith, let's say the word the interfaith gathering means sharing of faiths. So interview in that sense is to share our views, you see? So it means interview. We're going to use questions. These are a series of learning how to ask important and specific open-ended questions. But it's also a way to enter the view of the other person, their worldview. And lastly, it's a technique on how to share our views. Yeah. So you can see how key that this particular letter is, this skill is. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, almost look like, because we can see this as ancient, like a ship, and you see the middle pole is like the sustaining, the holding everything together and move things forward, and you put this forefront and telling us in the therapeutic setting, I would say, particularly from your background, and the relationship between the therapist and the clients. Is that right?
You've said it very well. That's right. And notice that it's in the middle. So oftentimes when we meet somebody, we may have preconceived notions of them, or we find out who they vote for, or we find out what religion they are. We have preconceived notions, but at the core, at the middle, of us, you and me, life, there are hidden things, but those hidden core things are the very structures that allow that person to make sense of their life, make sense of who they are. So that's the I in the middle. And you can see that it's an exclamation point, just remembering how important that is. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So interviewing is a skill set. And at the simplest way that I like to think of it and maybe teach it is to be curious and compassionate. Have a posture of curiosity. You're curious about what it's like to be the other person. This is not going into it about, I'm going to tell you what's right and wrong, or I'm going to, hear what you have to say just so that I can tell you how you're wrong or what I think, And oftentimes when I'm working with kids and then I bring their parents in, I'm teaching them oftentimes we've got to switch our way that we engage our children from a place of dictatorial nature. I'm going to tell you what you're right or wrong. I'm going to tell you about your life. And usually that's done because parents care and they're nervous about their kids' future. I get it. I understand. But what I try to teach them is be curious about what your kids are feeling. Be curious about their world. Approach it from a place of curiosity and compassion. When we can begin with that energy, curiosity and compassion, then the rest of the ship's approach naturally flows. Yeah. So the first S, if you will, in ship's approach, the first S is solidarity. It's entering into solidarity with the other person. And this is so, so important because if I realize that I did not arrive at my certitudes of life, especially ones that I was real sure about early on in my life. Get I didn't get those certitudes through logic. Uh, I got them because they were handed to me, but it's often a gut instinct, or it's emotionally based, or it's culturally based. And it's never going to be logic that gets me out of limiting certitudes. You know, it won't be logic that gets me out of that. Likewise, if I'm walking with somebody who's maybe from my perception inside of a belief system that uh, worked in the past, is working somewhat now, but there's limitations in their life given a particular maybe limitation of their worldview, I can't logically argue them out of that, nor would I want to. That's not the point of actual transformation. It's not transformation at that point, you know? It's just manipulation. But if I want to enter into their worldview, I have to move in and find out what motivates them. Why are they motivated to feel a certain way or act a certain way? And oftentimes those motivations are completely unconscious to that person. I may know that as a clinician. I may know that the other person has no idea, but what I do know is that most people, including myself, we don't want to be fixed. We don't want to be told what to do. We don't want to be told how we're thinking or how we're living is wrong. What we want is actually to be seen, felt, heard, and walked with. That's what we want. That's what all humans want. And so that's what solidarity is the skill set of learning how to enter into the worldview of the other by virtue of our common humanity, and probably our principal values are going to be very similar. From there, I'm going to try to look around life as if I'm you, because then all of a sudden things start to make sense. And I can start to see how alike we are, not because of the goodness also of our views, but also because of our mutual sufferings that we've had, you know? And it makes me as a ship's practitioner humble. So I wanted to ask you, and how do you resonate with this kind of thinking?
Yeah, it's I'm listening to you. I feel like, yeah, Doug, I can put myself in the therapist's seat and can feel it when, when people come from different backgrounds, culturally, religiously, different backgrounds. And like what you said, from the starting point, we have started from the place of curiosity, and also carry the compassion toward the person, rather than, preoccupied by our own thoughts, ideas, or judgments. And so you were explaining to us the solidarity. Solidarity is the place of, if I'm wrong, just fill in the blank, Doug.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh, no, you're right. The place. Go ahead, keep going. Mm-hmm.
So the place to enter into another human being's worldview, experiences, and just being another person's shoes. My understanding is that,
yeah. And what I try to do in my head, I try to think, when I leave this person, even if it's just a 5-minute connection with the person that's checking out my food at Walmart, or accounts or a client or a friend, when our physical time is ended in some way, my goal is that that person feels seen by me, that person, me, the depth of me has connected to the depth of them, even if they could never articulate it that way. But there was a resonance, a depth of resonance there that is almost bodily felt. like a good hug, one that doesn't quick, but it holds on, and it's one of those I see you and get you. And you can learn to do this. We all want this, and we can learn to do this even very quickly.
May I ask you a question, Doug?
Sure.
Why, as you come up with the term solidarity? To me, I feel like this more like exploring or discovering another human being in front of me, without preoccupied all the ideas, but carry the curiosity and the compassion toward the person. So why is the solidarity here? I mean,
Yeah, I like that question because I didn't even realize how biased my own worldview was when I wrote down solidarity. Because one person who's a friend of mine said, well, I wouldn't use solidarity because, that's going to immediately bring up communism, for folks. And, there's a way that the word solidarity can ring as communism. Or, so I would just like to add that my own Catholic background, steeped in Latin America, certainly with things like liberation theology, and what I would argue is what Jesus did with us, God doing with us through this Christ event, is this sense of it's beyond sympathy, it's beyond empathy. In fact, it's an action of empathy. So it's not just a feeling of empathy, but rather it is maybe exemplified by the fact that I can't carry your cross. That's yours to have, your burdens. You can't carry my cross. It's mine to have. It's my responsibilities, my honor, duty, But I can help you carry your cross, and you can help me carry my cross. And in some ways, we're all helping each other to carry these imperfections together. And together we incorporate our imperfections to create a matrix of perfection, of wholeness. And so that spirit, that walking with, that sitting in the pit with you, in your pit, sitting with you there, that is solidarity. That's what that word means to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yes.
Now, I don't always do it well, but I think that we can try. But I do know this: if another person with whom I'm connecting doesn't feel seen or heard, they're just going to feel judged, as I would. Constructive criticism that wasn't asked for always is going to be received as a judgment, an unwelcome judgment. But more than that, I think the only way that we're going to change the world, and we know that the world is so divided right now, it's going to have to become where people like you and me, and those who are really saying yes to trying to be stewards of wholeness in the world, we have to be able to scratch the surface of here and dig into the depth of here with people. That's the only way that we're going to move forward, I think. And so this is my humble, offering to maybe how to do that. Yeah. Okay. So once that we are in solidarity with another person to some degree, we then begin to cultivate hope. We cultivate hope. Now, here's the thing that's very interesting, Marie, and I know that you've seen this too in your life. We are very comfortable, when I mean we humans, particularly in the Western world, and particularly in Texas, being a Texan, I can say this. We're very accustomed to pointing out what is wrong. We are very accustomed to pointing out what we are against. But we're never, or very, very infrequently asked what we are for. What are you for? I know what you're against, but what are you for? But if you just walk around, you'll meet good-hearted people, good-souled people, but it's often the conversations are going to be, oh, it's so hot, or the voting this and the dumb that. We have a way to often connect with some kind of trauma bond, and this is all unconscious. I'm not saying it's malicious, but it is prevalent. But that's actually not what motivates us. What motivates us, if we are against things, and we're very quick to point that out in our opinions and our interactions, we are only against things because deeper than that, we must be for things. You have to have a measuring system internally to be able to stipulate what we're against, you see? But that, what are you for, like that thing, is often hidden. And I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with my father for 2.5 hours. This is about a month and a half ago. And he and I have a really good relationship. We've cultivated that over the years. We vote very differently. We have different worldviews. Now, I grew up with him, but I wanted to be able to see if the ship's approach is going to be helpful at all. Then I have to at least try to see what it might be like to speak to somebody that emotionally is very difficult for me to connect with on these deeper things. Not deeper things, rather, let me say it differently. There are a lot of assumptions that I have from my dad that when I hear something that's going on politically on the news or other things, maybe even things that I'm doing, I make these fantasies. I have these fantasies in my mind about how he is responding to the same news, maybe obviously a different news channel perhaps, but how is he viewing these things? So let's say on the realm of how do we engage with reality, he and I would have very different ways to think what is appropriate. And there's a lot of emotional friction inside of me. I didn't know about him, but inside of me, there's emotional friction. I thought, well, this would be a perfect example of how we can talk at deeper levels. So I invited him over and I said I wanted to talk about some deeper stuff with him. And, he's just so gracious. 2.5 hours. And I led by something like, Dad, I have a really good idea of what you're against. You're against, this political party. You think that particular state, city in Texas is the armpit of Texas, I was able to say, like, this is what I grew up with. But I've never heard you, Dad, to actually state what you're for. And that particular statement, his eyes got open. Inside of him, there was a curiosity, but I could also see almost an immediate reactionary tensing up, like, oh, this is going to be harder conversation, because what he is for is not readily available in his conscious mind. Yet it exists and bobs up and down. Let's say if the iceberg consciousness is the top of the ice that's above the water, subconscious is right below the water level, and the unconscious is the depth there. These kinds of what we're for values, those exist usually right there at the subconscious. But because they're not conscious and brought forward, then they often stay hidden, and there becomes an incongruence, an incongruity between what we're for and how our behavior usually is. So I'll give you some examples about that in a minute. And so
let me just close the slides for a second as you are talking. And
yeah. So you can just imagine it was 2.5 hours of finding out what he's for, and it was difficult. But one of the things that he was for is love. He's for love. So then I asked, well, how do you define love?
Mm.
He gave me a very quick response, to which I, because I'm a counselor, to his detriment, probably, I don't know, I dug a little deeper. It's like, well, what does love mean to you? And he says, well, love is about being present. Love is about engaging with others, being interested in others, serving others. And we dug a little deeper, and I said, well, how did you get to this notion of love? That was a hard question for him. Eventually we moved into Jesus, and I said, okay, so you are equating the actions and the person of Jesus as love. What does, in your opinion, how does Jesus exemplify love? How would you know that Jesus is loving? And based on his knowledge of the Christian story, he says, well, Jesus was accepting of everybody. He served everybody. He was inclusive. Almost, when he said that word inclusive, I kind of shook my head a little bit. Those are things that I grew up not ever seeing from him or hearing from him. This idea of acceptance of others, difference, accepting difference, including others, those kinds of things. But yet, when we dug deeper, we found that the very depth of his understanding of what motivates him, what he's for, his holy yes, those things I share. Love would be one of them. And yet, so much of his own upbringing early on in his life was counter to that. He was traumatized in his early life, and then that has framed his whole worldview. So there wasn't a lot of hope, you see, because what we're for is hope for a future that is some kind of manifestation of wholeness or joy. And he's lived into those, but he's never recognized them because he's always operating from the energy of what he's against. And so do I. I'm not saying I'm any different, but if you and I are going to change the world, and we start with ourselves, it's going to be to enter into solidarity in order to help cultivate seeds of hope. And that's why we have to learn how to ask people what gives them hope. What are these values that they might have? Now, truthfully, I'm actually trying to create inside of them, or bring to the conscious level inside of them, the very contrast of the law of three. I'm actually trying to do that. So it's hope for me in the ship's approach is playing the music of the law of three, turning up the volume from mute or level 1 to loud.
That's beautifully said. Yes. So from the place of a hope, what we hope for, and then comes to joy. The joy comes out of that.
Yes, because when hang on just a second. Hey, sweetie, I'm actually doing an interview. Love you. Thanks. When we can help people realize that there's a contrast in their life, particularly, and I'm thinking of myself, whenever I've had values that were in the subconscious but now brought to the conscious level, let's say it's love, or let's say generosity, and now I'm aware of it, but I'm also aware of the times, especially when I'm triggered or angry or these kinds of things, that there's a contrast and my behavior is not matching what my values are. This is not to judge myself and shame myself, but it's to become aware of the contrast. Well, that's part of the law of three. And so now we're trying to find the reconciling force. And the reconciling force, the seeds of hope are buried in the ground right there at that contrast. And so a ship's practitioner then would trust that the seeds are right there in the contrast of the other person, and we're helping them bring them up to the conscious level by asking them what their values are and what are their goals. Like,
Mm.
what would your goal be? What are your goals, your personal goals, to help allow you to feel um, more joyful,
Mm-hmm.
live a more meaningful life. I mean, and that could be a goal, to live a more
Yes.
meaningful life, to
Yes.
live from a place of more connectedness rather than isolation. Hmm?
Yes. Yes. I would say everything happens. Maybe this is too definite a statement. Everything happens in the context of a relationship. Let's just put it in that way.
Oh, it has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And usually the goals might be, well, I want to reduce my anxiety, or I want to reduce my depression, or I want to have a better relationship with my spouse. I mean, it could be something like that. Those
Mhm.
are all good goals. But what I often ask, and this is my way of trying to stimulate hope
Mhm.
um, inside the crux, inside the contrast,
Mhm.
and what I'm trying to do is say, okay, you want to have less anxiety to do what? Like, for what purpose? You want to be less depressed for what reason or why? Now, these are often, of course I want to feel less depressed. I hate this. Or, yeah, I hate my anxiety. I don't want to, yeah, I want to just feel. That's why I'm coming here to you, because I don't want to feel as anxious. But I ask these questions, even if they seem simple to
Mhm.
people, because if we don't have our yes, our what we're for, if we're feeling less anxious, but we don't have a reason or why to feel less anxious, then we're not really digging as deep as we could to actually lead to transformation. What are your thoughts on that?
Excellent. I'm following you. It's almost like anxiety or those underlying feelings, emotions. It's like agency. It's leading us to something. Something might be bigger, greater, better. Pop us. It just prompt us to ask those deep, hard questions.
That's exactly
Right.
right. I love what you're saying, because and you and I would probably share this same kind of clinical approach that's often offered by things like the ACTS, like ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. This idea that the uncomfortable feelings, they're not negative feelings. Feelings aren't negative or positive. This idea of, well, happiness is positive and anxiety is negative or shame is negative. No, they're uncomfortable, maybe, but they're actual blessings, because they're signposts, if you will, of where there might be an opportunity to massage out uh, some kind of blockage that's existing in the subconscious, under layers waters of our life, where we need to look at with compassion and curiosity in our own life, remove the rocks or bless the rocks, even, and then all of a sudden the flow starts.
Yes, that's a good analogy. Like I use the term breakthrough,
Mm.
break through the obstacles, whatever block us from moving forward. I have the program called Breakthrough to Wholeness. So as you are describing that, I'm reminded that yesterday I had a coaching section with a group of people. One of the ladies, she shared toward the end of the group section, she said, after the practice, now I feel different attitude. I have different attitude toward my anxiety and worries, all the emotions. Now I'm feeling grateful for those emotions now. I was like, wow, what a shift.
I mean,
That's a
that's
big
it though. That's the point. And you couldn't have done that. That would not have been possible if that person did not feel well seen by you and by others, well met. So that's solidarity. And the only way you can do solidarity is through the capacity to enter into the view, in some capacity. And then provide for her hope. But how do we have hope if we're, our emotions are so strong and intense and so uncomfortable? Well, the point is that the very uncomfortable feelings that we're struggling with can be signs of the energy that's bottled up there. And if by changing our perspective to these, giving them a spirit of hospitality, like what I try to do in myself and also with my clients, is say, you have anxiety. I know, it's so painful. What if we were to see anxiety as an entity, that in a sense is external to you? So let's just do a mind game where this anxiety, and you can say anxiety of financial anxiety. I'll just say financial anxiety. So we're just going to say this person's name is financial anxiety. And instead of saying, get out of here, I don't want you in my life, in your heart, picture a banquet table that's beautiful food, lots of food. Invite financial anxiety in. Have a seat at the banquet table. There's more than enough to go around. The spirit of abundance here. But then what I want to do is I don't want to just give my attention to this particular entity, financial anxiety. What I want to do is invite, but I'm the host, so I'm inviting all these other emotions, and I want to pivot, and I want to look over here maybe and think of all of this other space that I can now invite different feelings into. Well, right now I might have financial anxiety, but look around. There's trees. I'm breathing. My family is here. There's things that I can be grateful for right now. And that's not something I was thinking of inviting into this banquet when I'm only communicating with anxiety, financial anxiety. What do you think about this bringing in like that?
Yes, I feel like, it's like we were doing the welcoming prayer yesterday. It's like, okay, financial anxiety, you're welcome. You're welcome here.
Yeah.
You are seen, you are heard, you are understood, you are still welcome here. So it leaves that opening arms, opening space for the existence, rather than put the labels to shame it and, to beat yourself up. This is stupid, or I hate this. And that's just, I would say that's down spiraling.
Oh, yeah. Well done. And so just to give a real solid example of hope in terms of the ship's approach based on what you just said is, let's say I'm speaking with somebody and they say, well, I really want to deal with my anxiety better. I've got to get some tools. And I find out that there's the contrast. The contrast is that they are living with anxiety. They don't want it so much. They don't have tools, but those are the hidden seeds of hope there. And what I'm going to say is, tell me how you deal with anxiety. And it's usually, well, I hate it, and then I'm stuck in it, right there. I'm saying, okay, well, that is a behavior that you're choosing. But sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm choosing it because it's so common in my life that I don't even know that I had a choice, So the first step is to recognize when I start feeling anxiety in my body. Where does it register? Is it my lower chakras, my below down there in the belly button? Is it here in my throat? Is it my back? We have to become embodied more, chest. And then we can do our welcome here, sit down, that kind of thing. That's beautiful. And all of a sudden, the energy with which I'm dealing with this anxiety is, it was at a 9 out of 10. Now it's just the volume is turned down to like a 2. We're not saying it's gone away. We don't get through this life without some stress and anxiety. It's not a bad thing. But the intensity is down from a 9 to 2, and it can happen in 5 seconds. If you just change the perspective from one of bracing against, bracing is Latin for arms, bracing against, to embrace. And embrace is Latin for inside my arms, and if you look at the being crucified, it is a 180-degree hug. It's a 180-degree embrace.
Mm.
Stuck though I am upon my cross, it's also, I can feel like it's a torture, or I can feel like it's an embracing exactly of these feelings that I'm feeling. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now I want to move to the P. The P is process, and process means a ship's practitioner would keep in mind that they themselves are on a process. They didn't arrive to the level of wanting to be a healer without having gone through lots of dark nights of the soul, emerging into resurrected times. Those resurrected times then become new crucified times. You know, the old room, or the new room rather, of our lives becomes the new old room. Then we have to go through liminal space again, and then we emerge into a new room. So the cycle continues always. And we were on a process, so we have to grant others the journey, the dignity of being seen as pilgrims on a journey too. We can also learn things like spiral dynamics is an interesting map of consciousness levels. And this has become probably, I would say, cutting edge in many ways with a lot of spiritual and counseling types. And that is to realize that just like there is a physical evolution, there's a spiritual, there's emotional evolution, that our particular way to understand the world, our reality worldviews, are also along a journey of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. There's also a developmental track here. And we can learn what track, where are we at? Maybe in some areas we might be more developed, in other areas that we're not even aware of, we're less developed. I'll give you an example of this. Let's say that I am a person who has a very rigid and strict religious perspective in my heart and mind. It's black and white, either or. It's exactly like this. And if it's not at all like this, then it's of the devil. Let's just say that I have that. Okay. But then let's say that I have a near-death experience, or I have some moment of grace or some kind of breakthrough, consciousness breakthrough, where I enter into an alternative consciousness level that is unitive. In other words, I have some kind of experience of the divine that is all-embracing love, complete and total acceptance, a joy that I only can say, this must be what heaven is like. Yeah. Some people have these with ayahuasca journeys or some kind of psychedelics, you know. But then after I awaken from that alternative consciousness, it's not like I am transformed forever. I will always remember that moment as a memory, but when the dust settles, we return back to what our status quo is. The gravity that the place where we land is usually our stage of consciousness, not state. State is the ups and downs, but the stage. And that stage can be still pretty rigid. So I might say, I had the most amazing movement of God. And then when I come back and I start excitedly teaching about it, I will say, and what I learned is that you have to accept Jesus exactly like this, and you've got to be rigid. And so I'm again packaging up a unitive moment that was given to me as a grace, but then I'm talking about it and understanding it from a much more rigid and exclusive worldview, and I don't know it. That's a blindness, and I don't know it. Do you see? And we're all in this process of developing our stages. Our stages are more permanent stages, and we can develop them into greater and greater expanded places. But those are often very difficult to leave, because it usually means to go from one stage of worldview to another stage. It usually means that we have to go through a really uncomfortable dark night where we're going to be rejected by people of our former stage. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
you're getting to be a heretic. You're starting to talk a little dangerous there, Marie. I'm worried about your soul. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
uh, and we have to walk that journey until we get to another place of solidity, and that's where the new stage opens up, and we can say, what the stage I came from was beautiful. I'm not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but now I know how to wash that baby properly.
Hmm. Yes, I think as a human beings, we need a open the mindset and always a growth mindset. And and our journey is eternal journey, is ongoing journey. It's never ends. So I would just leave this there.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
uh,
and good, and we'll just move to the S real quick. Um, the last S, and that is service.
mhm,
So I want to say that it is super important that we invite people into giving to others, serving others. We also know from psychological literature that just doing acts of loving service to somebody else can be as effective as taking antidepressants sometimes. I
mm,
mean, this is an actual protocol. It's an intervention, if you will. It's a tool that therapists actually can learn to prescribe, and I do. And I usually say, between now and the next time we see each other, what might be something you would want to do for somebody else that is above the energy of the transactional,
mm,
and that's hidden and it's loving. And when I meet with them the next time, there's always a smile, there's always a surprise,
mhm.
there's always a kind of that was easier than I thought, and actually it helped me not think about myself so much. Yeah.
Exactly. So a few years ago, I went to AA recovery group just as a practical student. And
Mm-hmm.
I learned from the group of people, they're very much advocate service, serve others as a part
Mm.
of their recovery journey that bring healing to
The
their
12th
souls.
step. Yeah, the 12th
Yeah,
step.
to get
Mhm.
their minds off me, I, myself, the
Yeah.
self-centeredness.
In fact, they say in AA that if you're not doing the 12th step, the last step, the 12th step, then you lose all of the other steps. Like, that's the one that keeps
Wow.
incarnating. And I agree. I think that we can look right in the Christian scriptures with the parable of the talents. We have the parable where the master goes away and charges one person, gives one person, was it five or maybe 10 talents, huh?
And yeah.
And the other person five, and the other person one.
Mhm,
Yeah. And then goes away. When comes back, you've got the one that had the 10 invested and grew to another 10.
mhm,
The five did the same. So we have five. The one that had the one dug it, didn't do anything with it, and just emerged with one.
mhm.
Hmm? And then Jesus says, or in the parable, the idea is that if you are given something, in other words, if you come to some level of experiential knowledge of love, of depth, but we don't incarnate that knowledge, that concept into acts of loving service, then whatever we gained is gone. You have to plant seeds. If you're given a seed and you're enjoying the fruit, and we don't keep planting seeds, then we lose the food that we had.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in the spiritual life, it is in giving that we receive.
Yes. Uh, it's that he said the giving is more blessed than receiving.
Mm,
That's
yeah.
that's profound. The more we
And,
gave and the more we receive from him, the way we gave, we receive from him, then we freely gave. And
yeah. And I think metaphysically, we could even think of that as, when I bless somebody or give them something, I'm creating an energetic connection But that energetic connection, there's like you can almost think of it as an energy umbilical cord that's connected to me too, because I'm the creator of this act of service. Yeah. And so whatever energy that I'm giving to somebody else, that is feeding back into me the very energy of generosity that I gave. That's one way to look at it. Yeah. So I just want to say the ship's approach, I may have gone on too long on some of the letters, but the whole ship's approach is to help us follow through with the pattern of entering into the worldview, connecting with another person in solidarity inside of their roof, inside of their own house, their energetic house, helping them to identify what makes them hopeful, help them to articulate goals that will help them achieve a future experience of joy. Yep. And then help them realize we're all on a journey and a process, and I want to walk with you. I'll walk with you in this process. And then lastly, invite them, inspire in them the desire to incarnate, to embed, to plant seeds of loving acts of service. And that would be the ship's approach. Yeah. And I think, and I'll say finally that this is a great way to participate in the very life of the Trinity, because I think that is what the Trinity does, is that it gives us this capacity to be inside of God's own flow, in solidarity, the winds of hope, moving us forward on a journey in process, and everything is God serving us, and then we serving Christ as we serve others. It's just a flow that we're participating in.
Well, that's beautiful. You just tied it up. There's a 3-part series of the Trinity, and it comes down to, between the Trinity and our human being, and how we as healers function on earth to serve one another, participating in the life of Trinity. Is just beautifully you tied it up. Yeah, at the end. Yeah. Well, Doug, and I'm very grateful, and I really appreciate those conversation talks, and it's very, very rich, very rich. And it takes us time to digest, to absorb, and to understand and implement into our practice. So
well, thank you,
so
Marie, for
much.
giving me the space, the space here to connect with you, and blessings on your endeavors too. It's just fantastic to have connected with you. Thank you.
Good. So thank you for listening to our part 3 of this whole series called, Made in the Image of God, Growing in the Likeness of God.